YouTube channel. So I'm going to put that on now. And I'm going to turn it over to Tommy Magelssen, who is an assistant sports editor at the Dallas Morning News. Tommy, just want to give you a few minutes to kind of just talk about the Morning News' internship program, and also when you are taking a look. Leon talked about some of the things you should do when you're thinking of applying. So you're a hiring manager for interns. When you're seeing applications come in, what are some of the things that stand out to you that you look for when you're picking your interns?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, and so like Lisa said, I work at the Dallas Morning News. I've overseen our sports internship program for I think 8 years now, and we're very lucky that we actually get 2 interns right now. And so we do have a summer intern that's through the SJI program, which Leon is of course heavily involved with. And so if you're in SJI or interested in that, reach out to Leon, and you can also take a look at what our intern did for us last year. His name is Peter Roderkus. He was at LSU. And our other internship is a little bit unique because it's during the fall. And so that's usually going to be for students who just graduated. So our intern right now is Greg McKenna. He just graduated from Notre Dame. Our intern last year was Maya Taylor, who graduated from UT. And we hired Maya, I think 2 weeks ago, to rejoin us in the sports department. And so really what I'm looking for in that fall intern is someone who we think we could hire either down the road, or in Maya's case was very shortly after. And again, because we have a unique internship at the Dallas Morning News, it's during the fall, we're looking for someone who is very polished, because our intern is essentially treated as a full-time staff member, particularly on a high school sports desk. And so we expect our intern to be doing high-level work, and they need to have already done at least one, most of the time two, internships previously. And Maya, who we just hired, she applied after her junior year. And, I talked to her, developed our relationship, and then we hired her for the internship after her senior year. And so for those of you who are thinking, maybe I might not be ready, it's great to establish a relationship. And so that's something that appeals to me off the bat, so I can get to know your name. And so what we're looking for also I see, hundreds of applications a year. I can tell if you've copy and pasted your cover letter. It's pretty easy for me to do so. So you want to make sure that you're catering your cover letter and your resume to the job. So for example, our Dallas Morning News internship has a lot to do with high schools. If you don't have high school sports experience, that's okay. But if you do, that's probably something you would highlight. So any job you're applying for, again, if you're applying for an MBA job, if you have MBA experience, you would highlight that over your college experience. And so I always tell people, look, high-level interns, college graduates, you probably have 5 good clips, right? You got a gamer, you got a profile, you got a feature. If you've gone to a Power 5 school, you probably have some kind of breaking news. A lot of candidates, unfortunately, do not have that enterprise clip, which is something we emphasize. That's something that Leon said. And a lot of times it's tough for me as the hiring editor to look at your clip and know, like, how was your reporting on this? Did your editor actually write this? Did you develop this story because of a relationship you built? Did you write this story in 5 minutes on deadline? So you need to make sure that the reporting that you've done is obvious to me, so you can get that interview. Because if I think that someone else have written this, or if I don't know if, look, this is an okay gamer, but I don't know that you wrote it on your phone while you were in the tunnel, like, trying to get back on to your car or something like that to go to another assignment, to me, that can help you stand out, because I know that you are the type of reporter who I want to work with. And so I always recommend, yes, having breaking news clip is a great point. And again, like, if you're with your campus newspaper, you can also get breaking news that isn't sports. Raise your hand to do that. A lot of sports reporters, you're going to have to write about business, hard news, things like that. And so having those clips helps you stand out. So I always recommend to intern candidates to have some kind of clip guide. Just include, hey, this is the story. Here's one sentence background. I developed this exclusive story because I, made the extra effort to, go to a recruit's mom's house, and I had dinner with them, and that's how I got the story. Or, I was the only one who filed open records request for this thing, and that's how I got this story idea. So show me your reporting, because when I have 100 applications and I just can't really tell if you're a good enough reporter or not, odds are it's going to be tough for me to really kind of make the time to talk to 100 people, right? So those are some of the things that I look at. And, some of the things that Leon said. Again, what's the old adage? The best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is now. Take a look, apply for things, get some writing. We're going to be posting our internship for the fall sometime in the next week. I'm going to put my email address here in the chat in a second. Anyone, feel free to reach out to me anytime, and I'd be happy to tell you more about it. But I'll turn it back over to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Tommy. Aria, you're now you cover Vanderbilt for the Tennessean, excuse me. When you were looking for a sports internship, how did you go about that process? What are some of the things you know now, maybe you wish you knew then? And then I want to kind of bring it back to the internship guide that you wrote that I put into the chat here. You know, what made you write that? And just some of the things there that you were doing when you were and advice you might want to give folks for applying.
Yeah, so I would say that I went into college. I didn't really have a traditional background. I would say I did not do any journalism at all in high school. I did not do any until I joined my student newspaper as a freshman. My school that I went to, which was University of Michigan, didn't even have a journalism major. So I was a political science major. So all of that was to say that I felt like I was very behind when it came to the internship process, that other people that I knew, you know, they had professors and they had, you know, contacts. Maybe I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is not a large city. So there weren't like a lot of, I knew people who were from New York or DC who could like go meet with the writer from the Washington Post and get coffee with them. And I couldn't do that either. So I felt like I was very behind in the internship process. So I talked to a lot of people when I was applying for internships. I started my sophomore year. I asked a lot of alumni of my student newspaper, a lot of current reporters, which internships they'd had. I did a lot of Google searching. I did a lot of Twitter searching, just trying to find every single internship that I could possibly find that was out there. And so basically, I kind of applied to everything as a student. I applied for, you know, if there was an internship, I applied for it. And then I did that to really just increase my chances of getting one. And then when I did the interviews, when I got interviews, that was kind of how I tried to narrow down, you know, which internships I thought might be a good fit for me. I will say the first time I applied for internships, which was my sophomore year, I only got 2 interviews and I only got 1 offer. And so that was the internship that I did, which was at the Cape Cod Times. And you know, I had applied to, I don't know, 10, 15 internships, and I only got the 1 offer and 2 interviews. So then my junior year, I ended up, I, you know, went through the whole process again, and I interned at USA Today through the Association for Women in Sports Media program. I got that internship in November. So I kind of stopped applying after that because I knew that was one of my top choices. My sophomore year, when I got an internship, I actually didn't get an offer until January. So even though the best time to apply for internships is now, there's always a few internships that have applications that are still open in January or even February, just for people who, you know, may not have gotten one in the earlier cycle. So especially if you're younger, like a freshman or a sophomore, some of those later application internships, you know, if you can find them, they might, you know, you might still get one in January or February, because I did as a sophomore. Then as a senior, I got another internship, but I actually ended up not doing that internship because I got a job instead. My current job at the Tennessean, I was hired for that in May of 2021, which was shortly after I graduated. So I decided not to do the internship and to take the full-time job instead. So that's kind of my background. I would say that I got more selective as I went along. Earlier in my career, I was just applying every single internship I could find. Later on, it was more, this is what might be the best fit for me. These are programs I've heard good things about, and just trying to put more time into each application and more focused. The internship guide that I did, I wrote it originally in 2020 during the COVID during fall of 2020. That was my senior year of college. And I really wrote it because, like I mentioned, I kind of have a background that I didn't have a lot of necessarily built-in advantages, or people that I, you know, I had people who were giving me advice, but I perceived to not have as many as some other people. So I wanted to help people who especially might have been from similar backgrounds as me and not have all that infrastructure already, with some of the tips that I had learned along the way in getting an internship. So I wrote through the whole guide, and I tried to include not just, what to do on the application, but also some of the things like finding housing, how to, save money when you're at an internship and what to expect from the internship. I did make the link shareable for the guide. So it's in the chat. Lisa put it in the chat if you want to take a look at it. There are a few references to 2021 in here because that's when I wrote it. But other than that, it should all still apply today in 2023. I think the biggest thing that I guess I didn't do when I was applying for internships that I wish that I had done was kind of what Tommy mentioned with explaining your clips more. And I actually heard that advice from Tommy himself. I interviewed for his internship and I did not get it. I'm also, like I said, I'm full disclosure about this. I have applied to dozens and dozens of internships that I got rejected from. Most of them I did not get an interview. I applied to the Washington Post, didn't get an interview. I want to be open about that because it seems like people who are successful at internships, they got all the internships they applied for, and that is not true. I got rejected from many internships, including the Dallas Morning News. But when Tommy was kind enough to chat with me after that internship, and that was what he told me to do, was to create a file that explained all of the clips that I put in and how I had reported them, the process behind them, and kind of like why I included them. And while that was kind of too late for me to use for any internships, I did use it while applying for jobs. And I do think that it helped when I was applying for jobs, because then when I got interviews, they could be like, you said you did this for this story, what, tell me more about that. And I think the other thing that I would say is that my senior year, I started, getting more involved with some things in the paper. I think that when I was in college, at first I believed, you had to have this one path. You had to be the sports editor, be the football beat writer, all that stuff in order to get an internship. That is not necessarily correct. I feel like when I was a senior, I actually quit the editing position on my student newspaper because I felt like I had taken on too much. I wanted to just be a beat writer. So I continued beat writing, but instead of editing, I actually joined the social media section instead. And I started running social media campaigns for our student newspaper. I also ran a Women's History Month campaign for our student newspaper. And quitting my editing position helped me to focus more time on those other projects. And what I will say is that I did not get a single question when I was interviewing for internships or jobs. Why did you quit your editing position? I got a lot of questions about my Women's History Month and my social media experience. So some of those experiences that might be, non-traditional, or like, I didn't get the head sports editor position at my student newspaper. There's still a lot of other ways that you can get involved with sports journalism, that you can do other things that might actually stand out more on an application than, having a certain title or a certain position. And I think that that's really important to mention as well, because especially if you know how to explain it for, if you have an interview or in your cover letter or in your resume, if you know how to explain what you were doing, I think that, you can be just as successful with a lot of different types of experiences.
Lisa, I want to make one more point.
Yes,
and,
go
and
right
I
ahead.
think students need to treat applying for an internship the same way that you apply for a full-time job. When Aria was talking about social media, it just reminded me that I always tell students to clean up their social media page, because hiring managers or internship directors, they Google your name and they see what's out there, because it's a very, very competitive situation. So if there's something out there that would cause you to lose out on that internship, or would be a strike against you, you better remove it, because there's so much stuff on social media that can present you in a negative light. So one of the things that I tell SJI students, and I know Tommy had one, and I was happy to hear that Maya is joining. She was in SJI a couple of years ago. So she's also an SJI person. But clean up your, students need to clean up their social media page. And also, when it comes down to you being a finalist and they do that final interview, study the place that you're going to work. So when you sit down and talk to that sports editor, you want to talk about a couple of pieces that you have read online. You don't want to go in and you don't know anything about that particular organization. Remember, it's a very, very competitive situation. There are only a few opportunities that you're going to have to stand out. And you will not stand out in an interview. An editor brings up, well, did you see this exclusive that we had today? And you don't know what in the hell he's talking about or what she's talking about. That will be a strike against you. So clean up your social media page, learn about the organization that you want to work for. Also, learn, if you get a sheet saying that you're going to talk to these 3 people, learn something about those 3 people. Go on LinkedIn, check their Twitter account. Just study something about the people that you're going to interview with. But just remember, you want to stand out. So there are a few things that you can do to stand out. So now back to you, Lisa.
Yeah, it's good advice. And, I can echo what Leon said. Before I was at The Athletic and before I was at ESPN's The Undefeated, I spent almost 20 years at the Buffalo News. So I was a sports editor at the Buffalo News. And we hired a summer intern every year. And one year I hired an intern who was the only intern who ever came to meet with me to interview for a job and brought a 10-page critique of a website. He brought the 10-page critique of the Buffalo News website. And at first I didn't know whether to be impressed or offended. But once I got over myself, I was really, if he took that much time to kind of go through, learn what we do and offer some tips, that it showed he was prepared, that he really wanted to work here, and he kind of immersed himself into the organization he was applying to, and he ended up getting the internship. So before we open the floor up for questions, I see Nyla Myers, the president of APSE, is on the line here, and she wanted to say hello to everybody, kind of talk a little bit about our student program. And she is a deputy sports editor at the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Nyla, can you hear me? Maybe. Okay, well, I will come back to Nyla. So yeah, I can open up the floor now for questions. We can start. We don't have to do.
Wait, hold on, Lisa.
Oh,
can you hear
are
me
you
now?
there? Yep.
Yes. Sorry, I'm on my phone in Zoom and it's acting weird.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. So if you can hear me, thanks for. Sorry, I was late. This is a great discussion. I don't want to interrupt it for too long, but I just want to thank everybody for coming, and for Leon and Tommy and Aria for sharing their wisdom. And I want to encourage everyone here to join APSE and as a student member or start a student chapter. And there are ever more people in our organization can help with this advice. And I will pitch that the Star-Tribune's internship program is open for applications as of this week. And our deadline is November 1st. And I'm sure Lisa will talk at some point about how we can get you information about the internships that are available. But I just want to thank everyone for being here. And thank you. I might have to cut off soon because I'm at a dinner, but I'm glad this took place, and I'm glad to see this many people here.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Nyla. I wanted to get you in because I knew you couldn't stay for the whole call. Okay, so going to open it up to questions now. Yeah, I see a hand raised, so I'm just going to go with the hand raising here. So what I ask is, if I call on you, just your name, your school, and then you can ask your question. It can be a general question for the panelist, or if you have a specific question for a specific panelist, you can ask that as you ask your question. So I'm going to start with Chandler Anderson.
Alrighty, I'm trying to see if you can see. Okay. Hi, my name is Chandler Anderson. I'm from North Carolina A&T State University. I actually live in Dallas, Texas, so I wanted to talk to Tommy. I'm a sophomore, but I would be a junior come the summer. Do they accept sophomores? Because I know most internships are guided towards juniors and seniors.
You know, it kind of depends on the clips because our non-SGI internship is in the fall. It'd be very difficult for a non-graduate to do it. But there are other ways. Email me after this, and if you're interested in freelancing or doing some high school football kind of thing, that's another way to get involved. And that's another thing I'd like to mention to everyone. It's like if you're a senior and you haven't done an internship, you might be thinking like, oh crap, like I'm screwed. Go to whatever local paper is in your town, see what they need help for high school sports, because they will not turn you down if they know what they're doing. And so that's a great way to get experience, even if you're just taking calls on Tuesdays and Thursdays for volleyball and things like that. And so Chandler, absolutely, we can get you some experience here at the DMN, even if it is kind of low level stuff. But that's a good way to get something on your resume. So when you do apply for an internship, you know, before your senior year, after your senior year, you've got something like the Dallas Morning News, whatever the newspaper is on there. And you also probably have a pretty good reference on there too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question, Chandler. Okay, I'm going to go to the group at North Carolina A&T. I'm not sure who has a question there, but I'm going to let you ask your question.
1, 2, 3.
Aggie Pride.
Period. Okay. Hi guys, my name is Cameron Jackson. My question is for Mr. Leon Carter. If you could pick 3 things that would make the perfect SJI applicant, what would they be?
If I could pick 3 things, number one.
Yeah, let me interrupt you for a second. Can you just maybe just explain SJI for people who might not be familiar with it as you ask that question?
Okay, SJI was started, oh my God, in 1992 to help women and minorities get their foot in the door, actually to help many of them to get their first internship. And as we have grown and as hiring managers have demanded more of our students because we have a tremendous success rate, and as more applicants have applied, it has become very, very competitive. So we have almost 400 alums, anybody from Malika Andrews to Youngmi Suk. I think Tommy mentioned earlier Peter Rodicus, who's actually the sports editor at the LSU paper. There was a kid from Northwestern who's also the sports editor. So SJI basically puts you in a situation, in a deadline boot camp situation to help improve your skills and help you make an easy transition into the newsroom. And it's a class that ranges from sports editors to those who, say, for example, go to a school that does not have a journalism program. We've had tremendous success with all of that. So now to answer your question, what would make the perfect? Then one of the first things that I look at, what is the student doing on campus? Is he or she working on the student newspaper or the radio station? And I look at clips. So that's the first thing that I look at. I also look at letters of recommendation that you provide. Grades, I do take a look at grades, but that's just not a deciding factor for me unless you got all D's and F's on your transcript, and that's a no-no. I also look at your essay about yourself. You know more about yourself than anybody. You ask what's a perfect, or what 3 things. A lot of students make mistakes when they write their essay. You look at diction, you look at punctuation, you look at spellings. I I have seen students address me, particularly when I was at the New York Daily News and I was sports editor. I've gotten things, Leon Carter, sports editor, New York Post. They're just carelessness, being very careless. And basically it's a foreign thing that, you know, you guys do, and you just switch out the names and things like that. So you're basically looking for somebody who is the perfect candidate, so to speak, and they indicate to you that they really want to be in this profession. And in their application, their grades, their essay, their clips, and in addition to that, their podcasts, their TV reels, all those things show you that this person wants to be in the industry. So that's what I look for.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Aggies actually play Norfolk State this week. I think the Aggies are 0-3, so that Aggie pride may take a hit. Just kidding.
We're about to be 1-3 come this week. Yeah.
Thank you, Cameron and A&T, for your question. Okay, I'm going to go to Samuel Jane.
Hi guys, I'm a sophomore at the University of Maryland. I was wondering, in terms of when you're looking at clips, how would you advise going about, like, using a bigger publications clip that you've written for, because of strong editing that, as an intern that you've received, like, but it might not be your best piece of work in your opinion, versus like, writing for the school publication that's maybe a more strong piece, like, say the Washington Post versus like Maryland student paper. Like, how would you balance that and look as a intern, hiring manager? Which one would you prefer to look at in terms of interns?
I'll jump in on this one. So that's a good question. So a lot of times for your application, so think of it bigger picture, you're going to have a cover letter, a resume, and you're going to have your clips. And so I hate it when I get a lot of regurgitation on all three of those. Like, I don't need your cover letter to be telling me everything's on your resume. Same thing with clips. And so if you got a chance to be published in the Washington Post, but it's kind of like, it's a 250-word brief, you went to the Nationals game or something like that, is that really worth it? To me, probably not. That, again, that's something that you can put in your cover letter or something that you can put in your resume. I had the opportunity to get this to work with the Washington Post and learn there, even though you might not have been given high level assignments. And so to me, it's the content, as opposed to like, yes, we can all be awed, like, oh my God, you had something in the New York Times. It's like, I had something published in the New York Post when I was in college, and it was like garbage. Like, so I was embarrassed by it. And so like, I wasn't going to use that, even though I did love the money I got from the New York Post for it. Like, it was not worth putting anywhere like near my application. So just because you have that name, again, you need to think about what's the content of this, and you can mention that in your resume or cover letter as well, without wasting one of your clips on a 250-word brief that doesn't have a lot of, much to say.
And there are actually good stories right there on your campus. I remember looking at a couple of applications a couple years ago. One of the students submitted an enterprise piece that she did on Title IX and the anniversary coming up 50 years later, and just looked at that particular school and what the progress that school made. And I thought that was pretty good. I also, during the pandemic, when sports shut down on many campuses and students did not have game stories, but there were some great stories that students turned in on athletes, what they were going through, how they were dealing with the pandemic. So I look for certain things that shows enterprise work on campus, in addition to the game story. So yes, you may have a clip from the Washington Post, but a good enterprise piece on your campus may go far, because it shows that you did this on your own. You discover those things on your own. There was for example, Peter Rodicus, who interned at the Dallas Morning News. I remember looking at his clips, and he had a piece on, I think, the first Black athlete at LSU, and he did a nice expose on that. And then when I talked to him later, after he has now gone through SJI and the Dallas Morning News, he didn't feel so good about that piece because he felt that he now had gotten so much better. But I say that to say, a lot of times the attempt, and I thought it was, for him to do that piece as a sophomore, I thought he did a pretty good job. It was a pretty good attempt. But yes, you can actually look at pieces a few months later, a couple of years later, and say, "Dang, did I really write that? If I were to do it now, I would do it better." So, but just look for some enterprising pieces on campus. They're right there under your nose, actually.
Yeah, just to chime in a little bit, when I was applying for internships, I always included a game story clip just because they always want to see deadline writing, but I tried to make the majority of the clips that I submitted to be features in enterprise, and that was regardless of where the features in enterprise were from. So I did actually write a lot of features at the internships that I had. So I submitted a few of those, a few student paper features, but I would definitely err on the side of including more features regardless of which publication they were written in, as opposed to like, I freelanced covering basketball, like a random basketball game for the Detroit Free Press when I was in college. Like they were playing Binghamton, and it was like a really boring game, and it was a really boring game story. So I didn't include that because that was not my best game story clip. So I think it depends on what it is, but I would definitely say go heavier on the features, enterprise, explanatory, maybe multimedia, like that type of stuff over like game coverage, and you don't need to put something in just because it's a big name.
For the students, the Aggie Pride students, for example, we talked about A&T. A&T is 0-3. And the main reason for that, they moved to a different conference. Alumni, I hear, are not happy that A&T moved to a different conference. I also hear that GHO, the greatest homecoming on earth, wasn't quite like past GHOs. So already there are rumblings whether A&T made the right move. Could that be an enterprise piece for one of the students at A&T? I just tossed that out.
Thank you, Leon. So I'm going to go to Tyler. Tyler's iPhone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hey, I'm Tyler. I go to North Carolina A&T. I'm a freshman this year, and I was wondering, since I'm a freshman, what are like the internship opportunities looking like? Because I know a lot of times when I go to apply, it says like sophomore, pretty much sophomores and above.
You want to take that, Tommy, or
I'll defer to Aria. Looks like she had something to say.
Go ahead, Aria.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, what I can say is, at least in my experience, very few people that I knew did internships after their freshman year, but the ones who did, most of the time it was at like a local paper. So if you have something in your hometown, they might not even formalize an internship or have an application, but sometimes you can, email the sports editor, reach out to them, and they might give you, even if it's not technically an internship, like it might be technically like freelancing for them or writing stories for them over the summer. Or if your college town has a paper, you can pitch things to them to write over the summer. And I would say that that's probably, again, might or might not be a formal like internship, but that's probably the best way to get experience over the summer as a freshman, just because most internships that I have seen don't accept freshmen, just because typically they want somebody with a little bit more experience.
To piggyback on that, I mentioned Om Youngmisuk, who covers the NBA for ESPN. He worked for me when I was sports editor of the New York Daily News. And And we had interviewed a bunch of candidates, veteran writers, for an opening that we had on the Nets. And then Ohm came in with a little less experience, but he blew everybody away. And the thing, and I talked about earlier, we look to see how committed you are to the industry. Ohm, beginning when he was a freshman at Michigan State, and most places will not give you an internship, but every holiday, if there was a basketball tournament in town, he will email the sports editor of one of those teams and say, hey, I can freelance for you. Every Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. And that helped him get his first internship as a sophomore or as a junior. When he came into the Daily News to interview for the Nets job, he had more clips from college and now from his first job that blew us away. And I think, but the number one thing that blew us away was that this kid has been doing this since he was a freshman at Michigan State. So my advice would be, take a look who's in your town during the holidays. These college basketball tournaments, these holiday basketball tournaments. And say, for example, there's one of the schools on the East Coast and you're in the Midwest, email the sports editor, because a lot of organizations today cannot afford to send but one person, and they would love to have a backup doing sidebars and whatever. And that's a way to also to build up your clip file.
Thanks,
Thank
Leon.
you so much.
Before we go to any more questions, we've talked a lot about applying and some of the things that hiring managers are looking for. Tommy, I want to kind of take it to once you're in the door of an internship, how you kind of make the most of that. So obviously, without naming any names, if you can think of some interns over the years who kind of really came in and really stood out, what were some of the things that those interns did? What are some of the qualities that kind of made you, when you think, oh, this intern did a really great job? What are some of the things that those interns did to really stand out on the job?
Yeah, and so I think one of the first things is knowing the expectations of the job. And I try to be as transparent as possible. It's like, look, we get you for 40 hours a week and we are going to work you every single one of those hours. We think our internship is among the toughest in the country, but that is because we're trying to, groom people to potentially work for us one day. And so, and what I also tell people is like the first month, it's like, you're going to suck, right? Like you are acclimating to things. It's a different pace. And so understand that whatever you're doing, get better. And so the best interns would know, okay, I made a mistake on Tuesday. How do I avoid that on Wednesday? I might have done something wrong on Wednesday. What do I do next on Thursday? And also, how do I kind of look at the job and the people who are also doing the job? If you're covering, high schools for the Dallas Morning News, you're not the only person. Talk to the people you're working with. Take advantage of the opportunity where you can have conversations with, veteran sports writers who have been there for 25, 30 years and, find out, their trials, their tribulations, and take that and borrow it and put that into your job. Everyone's got a different system of how they're doing things. An example I use is if you have to take a high school box score by hand covering a football game, everyone has their own system to do it. You can ask me how I do mine. I'll say, this is how I do it. And then you can say, I like that, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently. And so talk to people who have done the internship before, say, what did you do to find success? And say, I like that. Here's how I can put my own spin on it. And lastly, I'll say is like planning, preparation. And don't pitch me a story that you can't do. Be honest and upfront. Say, hey, this is what I want to do. I think I can do it this way. And don't say, hey, I'm going to do the story when you haven't actually reached out to someone yet. And so again, be prepared and just kind of understand what we need as well. So don't be pitching stories about the Cowboys week 1 when you're supposed to be just covering a high school game on that first Friday. And so I can tell you right now, we've had some really good interns who are incredibly well prepared. Maya Taylor is one of them, Christina Long, Samantha Pell, Joseph Hoyt, just a lot of really good writers who honestly probably stumbled just a little bit when they started, but they recognized how they could grow and they did what they could without coming to me nonstop with like, I'm not good, I'm not good, I'm not good. Some of that was that, but they recognized what I was saying and listened to it. So definitely organization, planning, and remembering that you're going to make mistakes, so just learn from them.
Thanks, Tommy. Aria, how about you? What's some advice you'd give, like, once you're in the door for an internship? How do you really maximize that experience?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is that no matter what they are assigning you to do, that if there's something that you want to do, take initiative and ask if you can do it. So I can tell you that when I was interning at USA Today, the main assignment that I was given was to work on the breaking news desk. So 10 to 6 every day, I would, write up breaking news stories. But I was interested in doing some features. So I would go to my editors and be like, hey, I'm interested in writing a feature on this. What do you think? And sometimes I'd pitch them like multiple ideas and they'd be like, I think this is the best one. And that was how I ended up getting a lot of my really good clips. I wrote a story for USA Today about, this was, during the COVID summer in 2020. So I wrote a feature about how college cheer and dance teams were preparing for not knowing if there was going to be a college football season, because I felt like, there's a lot of stories about what impact it would have on football, but not necessarily as much about what impact it would have on the people that are part of maybe a football game day, but are not the football team. So that I kind of took that angle and they were like, go ahead. So that ended up being a really good clip for me. And another thing that I asked about at USA Today is I said, can I get some experience doing social media? And they said, sure, we can show you how we run our Twitter account. And so I got a little bit of experience doing that as well, because that was another thing that I was interested in. I tried to talk to a lot of people who worked at USA Today, not just on the sports section, but a lot of editors. I talked to some other writers about what they did day to day. And so I think that my biggest piece of advice is, again, just like if you have an idea, they might say no, but that's the worst thing that can happen is they're just like, no, don't do that. And they might say yes. And so if there's something that you're thinking, this is what I want to do, I've had this idea, I think this could be really good, just ask about it and take that initiative. And I think that, that's kind of how they might be assigning you. Again, like editors are not they don't have the time to just like assign you to do all these stories per se. So they might be like, okay, day to day, you're doing this. But then they're not going to come to you and be like, you should write this feature. But if you come to them and say, hey, I want to write this feature, then they'll be like, yeah, sure, go do that. So that's definitely, I think, the biggest piece of advice that I would give on that front.
Thank you. Leon, anything to add to that? Like just some things that have really kind of stood out with interns that you've worked with over the years?
Showing up on time. I always say, be there, be in the office. If you have to work the office that particular day, be in the office when the boss gets there, and always have ideas that you would like to do in addition to the ideas that they give you. Do not wait for an assignment editor to always give you an assignment. Come in with ideas yourself. I remember one of the interns at another publication saw a story in New York about how horses were dealing with the heat. And he is working in Baltimore and decided to go to Pimlico, the racetrack there, and try to localize the story there. And his editor thought, that was very good on that intern part. But do not wait for them to always give you an assignment. Always look for things that you would like to do, as Aria said, because that will stand out in the end. But be on time, because I've seen, act like you want to be there. And obviously, anticipate what can happen when you go to a ballpark, know where the Wi-Fi spots are when you have to file a story, obviously make deadline. But things that have impressed me when you show up in this space and you act like you want to be there, and or not act, but you show that you want to be there, and showing all those examples that I gave. So that's it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I think did we get to Tyler? I see Tyler
I did.
iPhone.
I think unless he has another one, I think his hand is still raised.
Tyler, you still there? Going once, going twice for Tyler.
Any other questions for the panelists?
All right, Taylor, we see you.
Oh, no, let's see. A&T, you have another question?
Go
Yes.
ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Carter.
No, I said go ahead, A&T.
Oh, okay. It's Cameron again. My question is, and I guess this would probably be for Tommy. Do you think there are ways that you can translate editing skills into writing and reporting skills?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I imagine a lot of you are going to be sports editors at your student paper, especially if you're a senior, and so you might not have the opportunity to write as much. And so one thing that Aria said about her experience is, having the social media experience there, and how that's something that can kind of stand out on a resume is something that's a little bit, not just writing a million things. And so by managing a staff as an editor, you can learn how to better plan your time, plan your people's time, and you can be like, oh, I learned how to help writers who report to me, write tighter, or like, oh, I got actually a lot of story ideas from like reading their things, or just reading a lot in general. And so there's like anything you do professionally can help you as a writer, even if it's editing or, kind of working as a producer for a TV station, working with, what we call, content distribution, newsletters, things like that. And so as an editor, you can also help implement ideas. And so one thing I ask sports editors is, what have you done to, improve your sports staff, either their writing, or how have you improved your reach via, social media tactics or newsletters, things like that. And to me, that shows that you also have an understanding of the business and what newspapers are looking for, because, I tell everyone, it's like, look, this isn't, the 90s, early 2000s, where you just write, you give it to your editor, they edit it, send it back, you send it back, whatever, and it appears in print. You have to be the newspaper delivery person. And so that means you need to get the story in front of the right audience. And so as an editor, you can develop strategies for that. And those are some of the conversations I love the most, because I love, talking shop, because I can also use those ideas, to bring to the Dallas Morning News if someone's told me about a new social media trick that they've learned that could help me too.
And
Thank you so much.
I would just like to add to that, those of you who are editors, don't think that you have to take a writing internship. I would love to see someone say, I want to be an editor, but I often see sports editors who want to become writers. If you want to become an editor, those jobs are always out there and they are available. So I know we love writing. I know we love to see that byline, but I would love for a college student who's a sports editor on their student newspaper to say, I would like to have an editing internship. And I don't hear that too often. So
Quick follow-up question for you, Carter. So at the A&T Register, I think like for our editors, there's still kind of like opportunity to write, but when you get to work for like in like quote unquote a real actual publication, is that kind of not the case? Like once you're an editor, that's really what you do, and then like the writing is kind of not there anymore?
for the most part, you're going to have to choose one or the other. But in some cases, when I had an editing internships many moons ago, I still had an opportunity to work on 3 or 4 or 5 stories during that internship that actually helped my clip files. So, but the industry has changed. So I don't want to speak for today's editors, but usually if you want to be an editor, you're going to edit. What you may want to do is to accept an editing internship this year continue to write for the A&T Register in the next semester, and then accept a writing internship the following year. There's nothing wrong with that. But once you get into the real world, or once you get a professional job, usually editors edit and writers write. And every now and then, someone on an editing desk will get an opportunity to write a story that he or she has pitched.
Thank you.
Gonna go to Kobe.
Hello, thank you. I'm Kobe Scales, the sports editor at Morehouse College. I actually have like 2 questions, if that's okay. Okay, so the first one was if you have we meant I heard you all mention like a lot of big schools like Michigan, Michigan State, LSU, things of that nature, where sports is probably like very, very prevalent. We have sports at Morehouse College, but it's not nearly as prevalent, say, as some of those other schools that you all mentioned. Whereas game stories may not be as good or things of that nature. I just kind of wanted to know you guys' take on, covering sports at smaller schools and how to get like the best stories out at those places where, the teams may not have as many scholarship players. I heard somebody mention one time, a kid went and sat at dinner with the recruit's mom or something like that. Like, I know at Morehouse, we don't have as many of those scholarship players. We don't have as many of those things as some of the other people that you mentioned at those bigger schools. So I was just wondering kind of like how you guys would go about that at a smaller, not even Morehouse isn't much of a smaller school. It's a big name school, but where sports just isn't the main focal point of that school.
Yeah, and so I think there's a great opportunity to develop close relationship with coaches and athletes. You can get some really good behind the scenes stories and really kind of figure out, what is it that's like making this athletic department, either run well or not well. And, one of my first job out of college, I worked at the Pine Bluff Commercial, and one of the colleges we covered was Arkansas Monticello, which is a very small college. And I remember I was floored when the head football coach printed off the cell number of every single player on his roster and handed it to me. That would never happen ever at any college. And so I was just given this gift. So if there was ever any kind of scandal or anything like that, I could just reach out to them. And so at a smaller college, you can develop these more intimate relationships. And I would expect to see, okay, what have you done with this? And just like I would ask someone who might have gone to a Michigan or a Vanderbilt or something, well, what are you doing to stand out? Because you've got 17 media members there. And here you've got this opportunity where you might be the only person, at a basketball game or football game. And so how did you take advantage of that? And so it doesn't matter if the stakes were low, you can like write something really good or find that story because look, it's a college in America. They've got problems, right? So you can go find that story and tell it. Doesn't matter how big the school is.
And did Kobe have a second question?
Yes, sir, I did. And Mr. Carter is actually kind of directed at you, and you were kind of talking about the editors just a second ago. And I was just wondering, like, I haven't seen very many editor internships, but I'll definitely keep an eye out for them in the future going forward. As I'm a senior, but I'm the sports editor at Morehouse. So just wondering, like, what would you say is the best way to kind of go about applying for internships as a sports editor? Is it that you have a lot of clips of pieces that you've edited, or are you putting out clips of the best pieces that you feel like you've edited? What is the best way to go about applying for an editorial internship?
I would say up front, a letter to the sports editor. I'm the sports editor of the Morehouse paper. What is it? The Maroon? The
Maroon Tiger. Maroon Tigers. Yeah,
Maroon Tiger. I was pretty close there. And that I'm interested in an editing internship. And that's exactly what I did when I was sports editor of my student newspaper several years ago. And it got their attention because most people want a writing internship. And then I presented I presented what we had done on the CIAA basketball tournament, how I directed the coverage of the CIAA basketball tournament, the designs that I did and things like that. And that was enough to convince the sports editor at the Norfolk Virginian Pilot to have me on as an editing intern that year. But get out in front. So say, for example, you are applying right now say on the application, I am interested in an editing internship and these are the reasons why. And let's just see how far it goes. But I think it would open some eyes. And, you want to improve yourself as an editor. I went from being sports editor of my student newspaper to being managing editor or executive editor, or editor-in-chief is what we called them at that time, of the paper. So I wanted to hone my skills on the sports desk that summer and just see a broader picture of how a sports section came together, because I thought that it would help me when I become editor-in-chief and running the entire student newspaper. So try that and see how far it will get you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
And I thought Craig had his hand up also, and then I see the Aggie section. Craig, did you have a question a moment ago?
I did, but I checked the time and I saw I don't want to hold everybody up. So I was like,
Well, it's okay. We're here until you we're done with questions. So
I'll let
gracious panel.
The question, it was actually about APSE, forming our collegiate chapter. So I think I'm going to reach out to you offline. And then I see it, North Carolina A&T has a question. So I'd rather just defer to them.
Okay, yeah, email me.
Thank you, Mr. Markey.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Where did the Aggies go? Here, do we have another question? I think you may be on mute.
We still here. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Eve Tay. I go to North Carolina A&T. And I was just to elaborate what you guys had said earlier, like if we're trying to build our resume, like little things we should do, like you guys said, going to high schools and volunteering there, and what other little things that we can do to build our resume so when we do apply for bigger internships, they look at those things.
I mean, I think you are hitting on it already. Just look for good clips anywhere, whether it is on a high school level, whether it is on a college level. And remember, it's not that you did 20 clips. It is if you have 10 good clips. And so you have one or two game stories, one or two features, one or two enterprise pieces, one or two surprises, meaning that I'm going to submit these 8 or 10 clips. And now when they come to me, I sort of expect to see a couple of game stories, a couple of features, maybe one or two enterprise pieces, but say someone interesting came on your campus and you got the one-on-one interview and you may have gotten them to say something that some of us have not seen in mainstream media. Those things can get your attention. For example, I don't think we have anyone here from Hampton, but the vice president, and I think the vice president was also Ed Morehouse. Now, she probably did not give one-on-one interviews to students, but let's just use the vice president.
Hey, she did give a one-on-one at A&T.
She did. So if I'm going through your clip file and I see a clip on Kamala Harris, and I see that you're the only person, or she spent time and she talked to you and you told the A&T register. Well, that may get my attention because I'm not going to see that anywhere else in the clip file. So in addition to the sports stories, I would probably include that one because it was different. It was different. So think about, as you build your portfolio, look for stories that are different, that will raise a hiring manager's eyebrow.
Yeah, I think to build off of that, I think a lot of times, people want to gravitate towards like, oh, I covered this big name thing, or I, covered football or basketball or whatever. I found that a lot of the best stories that I ended up using as clips at Michigan were actually about non-revenue and Olympic sports. I wrote a feature in 2020 about this girl on the swim team who was hoping to qualify for the Olympics. And then the Olympics got postponed, but 2 years later, she actually won an Olympic gold medal. So I had that story like that I had written about her before people really knew who she was. I had a story. I entered the APSE contest in 2020, and one of the stories I submitted was about the history of high school field hockey in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and how it played into Michigan's field hockey program and its success. So just stuff that you wouldn't necessarily, I figured out about that story by covering a lot of field hockey over 4 years at Michigan. And it's not a sport you would think of. It wasn't football. And I did cover football, but I didn't submit my football feature. I submitted my field hockey feature because I just felt like it was a better, more unique story. And I think that sometimes, just because it's not a big name, if it's a really good story, it's a really good story. And then the other thing that I would say is when I applied for a job, I want to say right out of college, when I applied for a job, they asked for a multimedia clip. And so I did a clip that was just my social media sample. So it was like, here were some tweets that I drafted. I screenshotted the tweets. I put them in a file, and I said, I wrote this tweet, here's the metrics that the tweet did. Here's what project this tweet was part of. Because I ran a project for Twitter account of Today in Michigan History. That's what it was called. They're actually still doing it there. So I kind of explained that. I showed some examples of it. I showed some of the metrics that it got. And so if you have something non-traditional like that, you can still put it in a clip. Like you can still write up a file explaining, here's what this is, here's what I did with it, here's how I contributed to this, whether it's, maybe hosting a podcast, maybe doing social media, video, whatever that is. And I feel like that can help you stand out as well.
Great, thank you. Any other questions before we wrap up?
We had one more.
Yeah, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Two quick questions. They're so eager, Miss Wilson. Kristen, go ahead.
Oh, that's great. That's what this is for. Yeah, thank you guys for everybody for hanging in here.
Okay, so hi, my name is Christine Davis. I attend North Carolina A&T State University, and I'm a junior. And my question is, if you are still in the learning process and you don't have as much experience, what are some ways that you can make your application stand out for if you're trying to apply for internships?
I definitely think that a good cover letter is really key. The best advice that anybody ever gave me about cover letters is, if you were writing a story about your journalism career, what is your lead? And that should be the first paragraph of your cover letter. So when I was a sophomore, I covered March Madness, and I remember I was trying to go to the opposing team's locker room after a loss, and I didn't even know when their locker room was open. I only knew when the team I was covering when their locker room was open. So I found out that their locker room was open right then. I was eating some chicken tenders in the hallway where the locker rooms were. I just abandoned the chicken tenders, just dropped them, ran down the hall wearing heels so I could go in the opposing locker room. And that was the story that I told in my cover letter. And so whatever it is, it doesn't have to be March Madness. It can be anything that, you had a unique experience, or that shows you were hustling for a story, or that shows you, you know, whatever it was, if you put that in your cover letter and you make your cover letter pop and you make it like stand out, I think that can really help you get in the door and explain. My approach to cover letter too is just approach it like a story. Like, what is the main thing that you want to sell the employer on? So for me, when I was in college, I would typically write my cover letter like, I like to write really unique stories, find stories that nobody else is telling. So I would find an anecdote that related to that. And I would kind of build my whole cover letter around it. And so I think that doing that can really help you to stand out. It can help to display also what you've learned, what you're doing, what you have done, and what you hope to learn from the internship as well. And I think that doing that can really help you to kind of show, to sell the employer that you're applying for an internship at on your experience, and how you both have grown from your experiences and can continue to grow in that area through the internship that you're applying to.
That is so important, because I pay attention to a lot of cover letters because I learned so much about you. But there's one word that turns me off in a cover letter, and that word is passion. I have a passion for sports. Don't tell me I have a passion for sports. Your cover letter, I should be able to make that conclusion by reading how you are hooked on sports. A lot of times when people say I have a passion for sports, I just watch Sports Center and I just, tell me, just like one person said several years ago, when they knew that they wanted to do this, they were in Louisville. And it was the day where Kentucky and Louisville, two basketball teams, had gone 20 or 30 some years without playing each other because Kentucky didn't want any part of Louisville. And the person is in that city that day where the NCAA had put them in the same bracket, and they finally met for the right to go to the regionals. And the game ended in overtime. The regulation ended tied, and it went into overtime, and Louisville blew them out. And then the person had to go into the office to help put out the paper. The person said that's when he knew he was hooked, and talked about how the cars in Louisville were honking their horns and just described the entire scene, almost wrote another story in his cover letter. So that told me that the person was passionate. He didn't have to even use that word, passion. And so tell me, show me, but not just use that word. I hate that word when I see that.
One last thing to add on there is don't lie on your application or anything. Like I know when I was a young student journalist, I was like, how can I pad this out? Let me find some really good, get the thesaurus out to embellish this, when I worked at Which, what I actually did. Explain in your cover letter, hey, I got into journalism late. I needed to work while I was going to college, and so that's why I wasn't able to necessarily start the student paper until my junior year, things like that. Be honest, because, people like me, Leon, Aria, Lisa, we're going to see these, and we can also make a deeper connection with you as well, as opposed to just, like Leon said, I've always had a passion for sports since I was 4 and liked watching, Sports Center. So be honest, be open about, why you might not have as much stuff on your resume. I had a really good application a couple of years ago from a young woman in East Texas. She's like, look, I know I don't go to a big school. I know there's not as many opportunities, but here's how I made the most of that opportunity. And so don't try to over embellish, and just be honest about, look, this is why this stuff happened. This is why my GPA is a 2.9 because of A, B, and C. And also, speaking of GPAs, like, I don't really need to see it unless it's a 4.0. Like, as long as you're graduating, right? Like, who cares? And put your education at the bottom. That's not the most important thing. And as someone who barely got a 3.0 in college, it's not important. It's like, can you write? Can you report? Are you ethical? That kind of thing.
Thanks. We had a request for the panelist emails in the chat. Leon, I put yours in. But Tommy and Aria, if you could drop it before we break, that'd be great. Before we go to question 2 there, I just want to follow up on the cover letter thing. It really is important. Until I became a hiring manager, I didn't realize how important they were, or realize how bad mine were when I was looking for jobs. Because when Tommy talks about copying, and I wasn't doing boilerplate, but I wasn't putting much thought into it. It was pretty much an afterthought of when I sent in my resume. And once I start reading some really good cover letters, I saw where I'd fallen short in that area. And another thing I will say with that, cover letters, sometimes don't be afraid to take a chance and tell a personal story in there. I've hired people off that. I had an intern tell me that when his father was battling cancer, his father told him, when you go to the game tonight to cover the game, write what I can't see on TV. And he said he takes that advice, and how he's a sports writer, was in the business, but he talked about how that's the best advice he's ever gotten. And whenever he's out covering something, he always remembers that, write what I can't see on TV. And just knowing you put that kind of detail into your work, where you're looking at so many different applications, sometimes something like that can at least maybe not get you the internship or the job, but it's definitely going to make me want to call you and talk a little bit more about you. So sometimes don't be afraid to put something in there. What makes you go every day, and if I know you're out there grinding, I might want to like give you a call and talk to you about the position. So there's a second question from A&T before we wrap.
We no longer have that question, but North Carolina A&T would like to thank you guys so very much, all of our wonderful panelists. This was amazing.
Oh yeah, thank you so much, for showing up, and it's a whole room full of you. It's awesome. And so you're a chapter. Anyone else who's on here might be part of a chapter, or maybe you're just a student member that's not aligned with the chapter, or maybe you're just a college student out there. APSE usually does these monthly. Sometimes it's panels like this, sometimes it's guest speakers. We want to have some things later in the semester, or maybe the beginning of next semester, where you can highlight some of your best work, kind of a how we did it panel, where you can kind of like share how you got some of those stories and highlight that. So got a lot of good things planned for the year, which we'll be in touch with you about all of that. So thank you so much for joining tonight, everybody. And I want to thank our panelists for their time and their generosity. Leon, Tommy, and Aria, thank you so much for doing this.
And I have one parting shot. After you have gone through your interviews, whether it is for an internship or a little bit later on for a full-time job, a thank you note to everybody who interviewed you can also be a way that you can distinguish yourself. I know people like to email because we're in the digital age, but sometimes a handwritten note is also important. I know of one hiring manager who eliminated people if he did not hear from you after 72 hours. Because the way he looked at it, if I spent time during my busy day to interview you, you can spend a few minutes to thank me for that. And also, I have seen people earn points by thanking the admin person, because that is the person who booked your trip, booked your hotel, set up your meals, and you're going to walk in the office and ignore that person. So if you want to win, find another way to win points. Be respectful to the admin person. But beyond that, make sure you take time out to thank people who interviewed you. It's so easy to do these days where you can just shoot an email. But it can also win you a few points. And you can, when you thank them, you can include just a line. I would love to work for you because, just spend another line or two selling yourself in that thank you note. So that's my parting shot.
Yeah, and that's great advice. And a handwritten note, if you can take the time to find the address and send it, we notice because we just don't get that many anymore. So yeah, it's a nice touch when you can do that.
This is Craig Allen Brown, Department Coordinator in the Journalism Department at Morehouse. I want to also thank all of you for taking time to come, and we went over, and y'all are still here, still answering questions and whatnot. So I truly appreciate that. Ron Thomas told me to tell all of you hello. He wasn't able to make the call tonight, but he sends his regards. I really wanted to shout out Aria because I had never heard of the Association of Women in Sports Media. So I have a bunch of Spelman students that I interact with as well. So I'm going to pass that information on to them, and thank you for bringing that up. A great panel tonight. I truly appreciate it.
Thanks, Craig.
And
Thanks for sharing.
Morehouse APSE chapter, right?
We're working on it.
We're going to make that happen. So Morehouse will be the next HBCU that's with an APSE chapter.
Yeah, it is so important for particularly HBCUs, because I know one student earlier, I think, who was it? Kobe talked about it talked about stories that perhaps Morehouse students don't get because they're not at a larger school. And I would just say it's, APSE is very important for HBCUs to be part of, because that's where all the hiring managers are. And next summer, APSE convention, I think, is in Charlotte.
It is in Charlotte, yep.
If we can get a couple Morehouse people there, that would be great. Or someone, if they live, near the Charlotte area and they go to Morehouse in the fall, it'd be great to get them there because it's so important.
That's already on our calendar. I'm bringing in as many Morehouse students as I possibly can. It being in Charlotte, there's no reason for us not to be there in numbers. So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll do a further development session and everything. Yeah, you'll get a lot out of it for sure.
We'll definitely be there. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Okay, I'm gonna let everybody go. Thank you so much, everybody who hung in till the end. And our panelists, thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. This is great. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you all.